So when we last left off, our ancestors were just freed with the Emancipation Proclamation, and there's so much happening around 1865 with the suppression of our ancestors on every single level, the rise of the KKK. There's so much to talk about. So let's begin with the birth of a bank and the death of Lincoln. So America is in its Reconstruction era after the end of the Civil War, and the Freedmen's Bank was established in 1865 to help our newly freed ancestors have an actual bank to do business with, as well as teach us financial literacy. And the cool thing about this bank is that it was designed to employ a lot of our ancestors as well. And Lincoln loved this idea, which created a bigger problem for him because we all know what happened later. The death of President Lincoln ended the promise of 40 acres and a mule. Andrew Johnson said, "Heck no, we are not doing that." To combat our ancestors' newly enacted emancipation, black codes were created throughout the South. And the black codes tried to limit things like what they can buy as far as property, where they can be, how late they can stay out. And even though the black codes did exist, it was the first time that our ancestors had access to buying things like livestock, land, and assets. And the Civil War created this problem for the South. They had access to free labor for so long. And now that everyone has to be free, now they've got this land that needs to be worked, but there's no slaves to work it. And this is where sharecropping comes into play. Sharecropping is basically saying, I have this land, you can come in and work it. All you have to do is give me some of the harvest and I'll pay you. And while most free slaves use sharecropping to create wealth for themselves, the practice is pretty much slavery 2.0 because the freed slaves did not have tools to use. Now imagine a farmer having access to land but no tools. But don't worry, because old Massa is gonna loan you his tools, not borrow for free, loan as in interest. It's crazy to me how Massa lost his free labor, but yet still comes out like a bandit, because now he still gets somebody to work his land and he's getting money on top of what he's doing. Now, whatever wealth that our ancestors were accumulating at this time, it makes them stick out like a sore thumb. And with the rise of the KKK, you have lawyers, you have doctors, you have law enforcement and judges, all members of the KKK. So imagine a cop walking into one of our ancestors' homes and just stealing money. Where is this person going to go to? It says this cop just stole X amount of dollars from me. And the judge is going to be like, yeah, right, get out of here. And then they have so much mental stress that they want to go see a doctor. And then the doctors are going to be like, yeah, whatever, get out of here. Or prescribe them something that's going to be more detrimental to them. And we may think, well, let's vote to change or enact new rules so this can't happen. What hooded group do you think is posted outside of voting booths on voting day to suppress the black vote? Remember that bank that we talked about that opened up in 65? Even though Congress voted to establish that bank, in 72, they also established to close it. And don't think all of Congress is bad. We had our first 2 black Republican senators in Congress around that time. And I want to get these names right. So we had Hiram Revels in the 70s and then Blanche Bruce in 75, both representing Mississippi during the Reconstruction era. So to recap, as we move into the 1880s, our ancestors are getting no easy access to land or property. We're not inheriting anything. A clan of hooded men are established and growing. Our ancestors are losing protections on every level, whether it's local, legal, or financial. And then they have to deal with Jim Crow laws for the next century. And Jim Crow says, hey, it's okay that we're segregating as long as these places are equal. So Jim Crow separated everybody like some laundry, and people before Rosa Parks like Claudette Colvin and Homer Plessy challenged that. Homer Plessy was a mixed race man who thought he was light enough to pass and tried to use a train car. And people said, oh, heck no, what are you doing here? In 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson was the case that went to the Supreme Court to challenge Jim Crow. And the Supreme Court upheld the ruling that as long as you have separate but equal institutions or facilities or activities. This is a legal thing that we're doing here. And if we take the last couple of decades that we've already talked about in this video, do you actually think that the things that our ancestors had access to was equal? In the 1900s, even though all of this crap is happening to our ancestors, we see entrepreneurship thriving. The Great Migration begins where people are moving out of the South and into other states to pursue higher wages and a life that's more free from racism. And this explosion in entrepreneurship is giving rise to our first millionaires, such as Madam C.J. Walker, who got her money through cosmetics, and Robert Reed Church, who got his money through real estate and banking. The birthplace of black capitalism is Jackson Ward. It's in Richmond, Virginia, known as one of the first Black Wall Streets, where everybody's coming together, putting their money to work, and recycling the black dollar for the first time. Jackson Ward was not the only Black Wall Street that we had. In 1906, a visionary named O.W. Gurley moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and his idea was to become rich and to have political power. He bought 40 sections of land and built a boarding house next to a railroad track, and he named the street Greenwood after a city in Mississippi. He knew that people were moving away from Mississippi, and he probably named it Greenwood so people would have some familiar sounding names to move to. Now, Gurley gets this land from J.B. Stratford, who was also an African American. And Stratford has the idea, his idea was, I'm not selling this to anybody else unless they're black. And so when Gurley came in, he said, I got you, fam. Here's your 40 sections. And Gurley has the same exact idea. He is not selling to anybody unless they're black. This is the exact mindset that we need to have today. Recycle the black dollar. But that's a video for the future. A few short years later, as these Black Wall Streets begin to grow, the black dollar becomes worth over $700 million. But you know, good things can't always last. In 1909, we had convict leasing starting, and it's basically sharecropping, but for imprisoned people. In Sugar Land, Texas, they have all these prison inmates, and they said, well, if we look at that 13th Amendment there, it says that everybody's entitled to rights unless they're in prison. So we can do whatever we want with these prisoners. And so they have prisoners working land for free, but it's a good thing that there's nothing but fine, upstanding characters in the police force, and they never unjustly accused or arrested any of our ancestors. And then on top of that, we have soldiers coming back from World War I looking for jobs and not finding them. So they start to get resentful, and they see these black towns and cities prospering, and they're literally like, in 1921, the Tulsa Massacre happens. Now, this started basically Emmett Till style. Some lady accused a black guy of doing something, and somebody else took it out of proportion. A mob forms and just burns Black Wall Street to the ground. And this is not the first time black cities that are prosperous are destroyed. In 1934, there's a housing problem. Lots of people want houses, but all these banks can't underwrite what's happening. They can't give out loans. So the government creates the FHA, Federal Housing Administration. And this is a beautiful example of why we need free markets and we need entrepreneurs, because the federal government cannot be relied on to do anything accurately or efficiently. The FHA came in and had money to back up loans, but they're only giving loans out to a particular kind of people in a particular kind of area. The government does what they did to Native Americans, push them out to some horrible land, let them fend for themselves, except our ancestors don't get any tax benefits when it comes to building something like a casino. Land is divided from best to worst.
All the largest cities in the United States, and they broke cities down into 4 different areas. Red is considered hazardous, that's the worst. Yellow is considered definitely declining. Blue is considered still desirable, and green is considered the best.
Which section do you think our ancestors got? Let's say our ancestors lived in an area that showed promise and growth. What did they do? The government gets to come in, claim eminent domain because they need to build a highway, kick our ancestors out of their home, and then push them into the garbage areas, because even though they might have the money to afford somewhere nicer, you're not going to get approved for anything as far as a loan goes unless you're in the red areas. You know the Gateway Arch in St. Louis? Black people used to live there. So our ancestors are moved into the areas on a map, literally colored red. This is known as redlining. It's the worst of the worst. And when we think about where are we going to build our smelly factories, where are we going to put our landfills? Well, let's put them inside or adjacent to these redlined areas. So imagine waking up every day and you smell feces, or waking up every day, you look out the window and you see a poop factory. How happy are you going to be? What's the quality of life that you're going to have when you have that exposed to you every single day? And now our ancestors start to get the reputation that they are slummy people because they live in the slums. The HFA perfected the idea of slumming it, and our ancestors were the guinea pig. And other people start to think, I don't want Black people living in my neighborhood because they're going to turn our neighborhood into a slum. This is how these people are. So when we think about building generational wealth, one of the 4 pillars of wealth is real estate. Our ancestors had access to the worst real estate. So it's either not worth passing on, or when you do pass it on, you're not actually getting any value. The whole point of owning property, owning an appreciable asset, is that it goes up in value. If you're stuck in redline areas, there's no value that you obtain. There's no point in getting the loan that's going to be charging you interest for something that stays at the same value or depreciates in price. It's like buying a car. And as real estate values explode over time in the coming decades, the wealth gap between our ancestors and everybody else blow-uptuates, but in a bad way. The other thing to highlight is in 1946, a GI Bill was passed where if you served the country and fought in World War II, when you come back, you're going to have access to education, you're going to have access to money, you're going to have access to medical, all these good things. So our ancestors signed up to be a part of the military, but once they came back from the war, do you think our ancestors had access to those same benefits?
In short, a land of liberty,
where all men are free.
So it's 40 acres and a mule 2.0. They were promised money, they were promised benefits, and people made it more difficult for them to access that. And we're going to stop right here because the next era is the civil rights era, and we're going to pick up next time with Brown versus the Board of Education. A lot of my information for this video comes from History of the Black Dollar as well as The Color Law, so I highly recommend you check out both of those books. And before we go, I want to talk about why I kept saying our ancestors. If I just said former slaves or Black people, it doesn't hit. It doesn't hit the same as saying our ancestors. This is the kind of things that our ancestors, your great-great-great-grandparents, somewhere along the lines, this happened to them. So I don't know if you're like me, but if I see somebody getting hurt on the internet, it's like, okay, somebody's getting hurt. But if it was somebody in my family getting hurt, I will rage. So I use the term our ancestors to get into your mind that this is the type of crap that they had to go through. And for you and I to be here chilling and spending our money on liabilities as opposed to assets when it was so difficult for them to obtain assets, and they wanted to because they knew that that was their way out of whatever life that they're living, then I need to get you guys to have the correct mindset moving forward. We need to buy assets. We live in a capitalist society, and the only way to win in a capitalist society is to be wealthy by owning assets. I didn't write the rules, okay? If you lived in a different country, you might not have to do this. But if you live in America, you have to be purchasing assets as often as you can. No one's coming to save you, and you don't want your ancestors looking down on you, like smacking you in the back of the head Like, what are you doing? Look at all the opportunity that's available to you and you're squandering it. Now, maybe you want to invest, but you don't know how. Check out the mini guide that I created. If you don't want to drop the $10, 2 coffees at Starbucks because you're thinking, well, I don't know what's in it. I don't want to be bamboozled. I've got a free preview for you to check out. The free preview will show you everything on how the mini guide is laid out and the topics that we're going to cover in the mini guide. And there's more in the actual guide that you buy. And of course, the best thing about it is you get access to a $25 giveaway that we have every single month on slide 42. So remember to stay educated, remember to buy assets, and until the next one, remember to smile because you are beautiful. Peace.